One of my favorite magicians said, "Many a good trick has been ruined by improvement." But in a seemingly contradictory paraphrase, magicians stop thinking too soon. If you want a chance to prove that you're an erudite magician, sound off in the comments down below with who gave each of those quotes. No cheating. But those two quotes, as true as they may or may not be, are definitely on a different end of the spectrum. So the real question is, which is it? We want to explore that in this episode. When is it enough to stop working on a trick? How far can you take a trick before deciding that it's good enough? In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at a rising star in the world of magic who's attempted to answer this question for himself. And we'll take a look at what we can learn from his journey. Recently, I received an email correspondence from professional magician and author Nathan Colwell. Nathan hails from Chicago, Illinois, where he is a resident magician at the Chicago Magic Lounge. He is a recent author, and you're definitely going to be seeing more of him in the future. He was kind enough to send me a copy of his book, Theseus, which is the subject of today's review. In case you don't already know it, Theseus is a Greek story, or really a philosophical question of identity. It's the perfect setup for a card trick, which brings us back around to Nathan Colwell and Theseus, A Magical Journey. This book is hardcover, put out by Magic Inc., and is approximately 100 pages covering one trick. This is totally different than most of the books that you're going to find on your shelf. All of the effects follow the premise of the ship of Theseus and this identity crisis, so there's a compelling narrative to the trick that will get your audience hooked. Nathan gives you multiple ways to achieve the effect and present the story. There are versions for walk around, stand up, gimmick cards, non-gimmick cards, sleight heavy, subtlety based, multiple cards, just 2 cards, etc. In fact, there are 4 fully fleshed out methods, as well as thoughts from inferior or discarded methods, and contributions from 2 luminaries in the world of magic. One from Harapan Ong of Principia fame, and the second contribution from the late, great Simon Aronson. I mentioned that this is one effect, so what is the effect? It's essentially a 2-card or more transposition with torn corner or corners. I don't know if that helped.
A signed card is replaced piece by piece with other random cards, and yet it still remains the signed selection even after every piece from the original is gone.
In other words, a card is typically signed, and a portion of that card is torn and replaced by a torn piece from another card. That other card typically has a different back or a different color or something that differentiates it. Obviously, doesn't have the signature. However, after the corner or all of the corners have been replaced with a different card, when you turn over these new pieces, it's still the participant's signed card. This trick or this effect is all about a journey for your participant and getting them to think about their life, their journey. The whole Theseus question is a personal journey, and I think that's what really makes this book shine. Perhaps the closest thing I can think of to compare to this effect would be David Williamson's Torn and Restored Transposition. They're not the same trick, but if you know that trick, you might have an idea of what this kind of looks like or what the effect kind of is. Anyway, not only is the plot and the effect a journey for your participant and gets them to think about their life, I think it's also analogous for you as a magician. What does your magic say about you, and how are you changing to make that magic better? When you're working on an effect, something that is passionate to you, how far are you willing to go to make that effect perfect? If you see card tricks and whatever kind of magic a magician is presenting as telling us something about them, I think what you'll see through this book and this trick is that Nathan Colwell is meticulous, because this book is meticulous. For example, this book has one of the most dense indices I've ever seen, especially for a book this size. It's a 4-page index for a book with just 100 pages. Yes, it's detailed, but there's variety sprinkled throughout with different methods to achieve the effect for different situations, so it doesn't feel like it's dragging you down. I'm just telling you that there's plenty of things to learn in this book. Each of the 4 main methods that are fully fleshed out is for a different style or a different situation, and from my perspective, unless you're Nathan, you're not likely to want to perform this effect in every situation. In fact, there's probably one place and one way that you usually find yourself performing, and you'll take that method or the version that fits you and use that. If you like exercising your chops, there are definitely routines that are more sleight heavy and will require more manual dexterity from you. But if you prefer subtleties to sleights, there are also a few versions in here that will work for you. But if you love detailed writing with a tremendous historical perspective on who invented this move, how you could adjust the move, and some very excellent crediting, then you're going to love a book like this. So while everything's written out with the effect, the method, all of the details, footnotes, cross-references, etc., at the end, you have a really nice summary called Fundamentals that will just walk you through exactly how to perform the trick. So once you've walked through the trick with cards in hand a few times, now you can focus on just that final page or two without having to flip back and forth through each section. This is a serious book, one that really needs to be studied to be appreciated. While the writing style is certainly accessible, my guess is that it sounds like the way Nathan talks. I've never actually talked to Nathan, but by reading into this, I can see that he is an erudite magician.
Hello, my name is Nathan Colwell.
And so when he talks, there's an intellectual level that he assumes of his reader or the person who's trying to learn to do this. Indeed, the very plot itself suggests that you are somewhat of a philosopher if you want to be performing this. Many of the solutions are fairly involved, both from a sleight of hand perspective and also potentially from an arts and crafts perspective, depending on which solution you choose. I don't really think this is for anyone who is satisfied with a basic, ambitious card routine, although simplified versions are taught and are well within the abilities of the average performer. Of note, both Simon Aronson and Harappan Ong's versions are fairly straightforward and relatively simple to do. So all of that said, let's talk about the value proposition. The book itself is somewhat pricey at $50 for a hardcover book covering just one effect. It's definitely a thorough coverage of the effect and definitely one that will appeal, especially given the presentation. But it's pretty expensive, so who's the kind of person that would appreciate this book? I would suggest that the most erudite among you will like it the most. If you like scholarly work, this has it in spades. Or it could just be that you're interested in the plot itself and think that this could appeal to your audiences, which I am sure that it will. My biggest takeaways from this book are twofold. One, don't give up on an idea that you have. The ship of Theseus was in Nathan's mind for a long time before he worked out his own versions or even put pen to paper in the book. By staying the course, Nathan was able to come up with practical ways to do the trick. He also shares with you all the bad ideas or the ones that didn't really pan out so that you can see where he came from. I found honesty like this to be refreshing and frankly educational. Even if you won't ever be able to use those versions, they may spawn some thoughts of your own on how you could go in a different direction with those ideas. So don't give up on your ideas, and if you get this book, allow those ideas to marinate with the ones that you already have. And secondly, study what interests you. You become a more well-rounded magician. By focusing on subjects and things outside of magic, you'll be able to apply them to magic, and your performances will improve. You'll have more interesting things to say and ask of your audience. And even consider studying things that you don't think you'll ever use. It could change you in ways that you least expect. Back to the opening quotations I gave about magicians stop thinking too soon, and many a good trick has been ruined by improvement. Have you already answered down below with who you think it is? Last chance. Both quotes were actually by the same magician, one of my favorites. The incomparable Al Baker said both of those things. What was he getting at? I believe that he was getting at this ship of Theseus philosophical question in a roundabout sort of way. This book won't be for everyone, but the idea of it is. How far are you willing to push your magic to be the best possible version it could be? As always, my friends, I appreciate you watching, and until next time, keep reading.